All right, y'all, it's day 3 of Thunder Junction previews, and we had a lot drop, so I'm going to try to go very fast so this isn't a super long video. All right, so we have Fortune, Loyal Steed. It's a colorless and a white for a 2/4 Beast Mount. It's legendary, which is interesting. When it enters the battlefield, you get to scry 2, which is also cool, and then when it attacks while saddled at the end of combat, you exile it, and up to one creature that saddled it this turn, then return those to the battlefield under their owner's control. And only saddles for 1. This card, really good. If you're going to play the mount deck, this is one of the cards you're going to want to have. It's cheap to cast, it's cheap to saddle. Like, it gets to scry when it comes into play, so you get to attack with it, it'll get exiled, and then it comes into play untapped, and whatever you had saddling it. So you could get that ETB as well. So this is actually really cool. Vraska joins up. I guess we're going to have each of the main character get a joins up card, it seems like. But this is a colorless and a black for a legendary enchantment. When this enters the battlefield, put a death touch counter on each creature you control. Whenever a legendary creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This thing's great. Like, you just get to give everything death touch. This is fantastic, especially if you have some small 1/1s and like you just want to be a nuisance. And then if you have something that's legendary, you just get to draw a bonus card. Like, yeah, this card's cool. Wrangler of the Damned. It's a 3 colorless, white, blue, 1/4 human soldier with flash. At the beginning of your end step, if you haven't cast a spell from your hand this turn, create a 2/2 white spirit creature token with flying. This one's interesting. It's a human, it's a soldier, so it fits both those builds. It has flash, which is kind of nice. It only works at the end of your end step if you didn't cast something, but if you are playing a deck that's just got a bunch of flash stuff, then it might fit that type of build. There's a few of those that have been floating around, so something to think about. Probably doesn't make the cut in most, but it could have a very niche spot. Visage Bandit, 3 colorless and a blue for a 2/2 shapeshifter rogue. You may have this enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature you control, except it's still a shapeshifter rogue in addition to its other types, and it has plot 3. This is fine. We have a bunch of versions of this, like makes a copy of a thing. You could probably fit some type of combo-y thing with it, but I'd imagine this isn't going to get a ton of play. Fleeting Reflection, colorless and a blue, instant. Target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. Untap that creature until end of turn. It becomes a copy of one. This is fine. Like, we have versions of this now that, put a +1/+1, untap a thing, give it hexproof. We have that type of stuff. So this probably fits right in line with all that. Playable. But it has the upside of getting to copy something, which is also cool because it's another target creature, and it doesn't have to be a target creature you control. Lassoed by the Law, 3 colorless and a white, enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. Typical white enchantment stuff. When it enters the battlefield, you also create a 1/1 red mercenary. Weird. So you get to lasso something else of the opponents, but then you make a mercenary, which is a bad guy in this set. Even though you're lassoed by the law, but your bad guy isn't lassoed. That's a little weird, but I guess they're giving it a little extra value since it costs 4 to exile something. Vladimir New Blood, colorless and a black for a 2/2 legendary vampire rogue. Cool, so you get a new vampire legend. Whenever you commit a crime, put a +1/+1 counter on this card, as long as Vladimir has 4 or more +1/+1 counters on it, has menace and lifelink. Yeah, this is fine. I don't know how big this will get most of the time. If you're playing vampires, you'll probably play it. I guess if you have a really crime-heavy deck, then sure, you would play it. But outside of those, it probably doesn't make the cut. Prosperity Tycoon. Cool art. 3 colorless and a white for a human noble 4/2. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 red mercenary, blah, blah. Pay 2, sacrifice a token. This gains indestructible until end of turn and tap it. This is great and limited. Otherwise, you're paying 4 mana for a 4/2 and a 1/1, and you can sacrifice any token to give this indestructible, which is cool. But this is more of a limited card than constructed. Bristly Bill, Spine Sower. Colorless and a green for a 2/2. Legendary plant druid. It has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. 3 green, and you double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. This is kind of fun. I think if you're playing anything that cares about +1/+1 counters, this is just a freebie each time you play a land to put a counter on something, which is awesome. It's legendary, so you don't play more than 1 or 2. But late in the game, if you just have 5 mana and you double up everything and any of your stuff has trample, that's pretty cool. That'd probably just end the game. So, neat card. Good early, good late. Binding Negotiation. It's a colorless and a black for a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, they discard it. Otherwise, you may put a face-up exiled card they own into the graveyard. Okay, so that's kind of cool. You either make them discard something, but if you don't, then you get to effectively just get rid of a permanent they have in play. What's crazy though, this says face up. You may put a face up exiled card they own in the graveyard. So that's a little bit different. Basically, it's a way to counter plot cards effectively in black. It could have some sideboard uses, probably. Malcolm, the Eyes. We just had one of these in a recent set. It's a red, blue, 2/2, flying haste, legendary Siren Pirate. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you investigate. If I will say this, they are starting to add cards in the set that might finally make the is it play multiple spells, get triggers thing work. And a card like this that could give you a way to draw extra cards within those decks does help. So maybe this is a thing. We'll see. This is Seraphic Steed, a colorless, or no, not true. It's a green-white 2/2, first strike, lifelink. When it attacks while saddled, oh, it's a unicorn mount. I should give you that info. Whenever it attacks while saddled, create a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying. This does, however, have a saddle of 4. But this card, however, is very good. It's a 2/2 first strike lifelink, so that's already good, right? You can gain life, first strike stuff. If you saddle it and attack, you get to just make a 3/3 angel on top of it. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, neat card, honestly. And if you play the unicorn type decks in Commander, this is a sweet card for that. Shifting Grift, 2 blue plus, because this is one of those spree cards. It's a sorcery. For an additional 2, you can exchange control of 2 target creatures. For an additional 1, exchange control of 2 target artifacts. And +1, exchange control of 2 target enchantments. So you could pay effectively 2 plus 2 is 4, 5, 6, and you can trade artifacts, or actually enchantments, artifacts, and creatures with the opponent. We'll see how good this is. I don't really know. It's probably got a use, but you're relying on your opponent to have reasonable creatures that you want, and if you end up in the hyper aggro decks or the Boros tokens decks or whatever, it's going to be kind of lame. 3 steps ahead. This is the rare spree. Or actually, I just realized the other spree was uncommon and had 3 choices, and the other ones we saw that were uncommon only had 2 choices. So particularly interesting, and they gave that to blue. But 3 steps ahead. It's a spree card that's 1 blue plus 1 and a colorless to counter target spell. So you can pay 3 mana to counter. You can pay +3, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control. So for 4 mana, you could copy something. And then for 3 mana, you could draw 2, then discard a card. The fact that this is instant speed to be able to make a copy token or counter if you just leave the mana up, this card is actually very playable. I mean, it's either a 3 mana counter spell, or it draws you cards and discard 2, or it can also make an instant speed blocker. Yeah, I'd like this. This card actually should get some play. I'm going to be surprised if it doesn't. Rumbling Possum, 2 colors and a green for a 3/3 Possum Mount. Whenever it attacks while saddled, it gets +1/+2 to end a turn. Then you may return any number of creatures that saddled it to their owner's hand. It saddles for 1. If I'm playing the mount deck, I might want this, but I would want some number of things that have ETBs, obviously. If I do, then I play it. If not, it's kind of mediocre. Resilient Roadrunner, colorless and a red, 2/2, has haste and protection from coyotes. That's so good. The Roadrunner has protection from coyotes. Good on them. You got it right. Oh man. All right, you can also pay 3 colorless, and it can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with haste. Of course, because it's a Roadrunner. This is just a fun design. I don't think it's necessarily any good, but I mean, if you're playing the hasty deck, then maybe you consider this card. But yeah, protection from coyotes. That's hilarious. Terror of the Peaks. We know this one. 3 colorless, red. It's a dragon, flying. Spells your opponents cast that target. Terror of the Peaks costs an additional 3 life to cast. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. It's a 5/4 flyer. Honestly, this card's just good. It's been good. It was expensive. It was like a $40 card or something at one point. This will probably bring the card down to like the $20 to $25 range. But yeah, this card's just good. It's going to be good. People will play it forever. Not much else to say about it. Double Down, which by the way was a fun sandwich at KFC, and it's sad they don't have that anymore. But Double Down, 3 colorless and a blue. It's an enchantment. Whenever you cast an outlaw spell, copy that spell. Wow. This is cool. Being able to just copy a pile of really good cards, assassins, mercenaries, pirates, rogues, warlocks. Oh, we'll see. This is one I will definitely build around. I don't know if it's top level competitive good, but man, there's gonna be some fun stuff you can do with this. Insatiable Avarice. It's a black plus spree, +2, search your library for a card, then shuffle and put that card on top. Or you could play black black, target player draws 3 cards and loses 3 life. Interesting that this is a rare that only has 2 choices where a lot of the others had 3, but these choices are very good. For 3 mana, you can search for a card, put it on top of your library, or also for 3 mana, you can just have either player draw 3, lose 3. This card's really good. Really, really good. Yeah, I don't know where this goes just yet, but this card, even outside of standard and older formats and commander, like, this could get some play. Miriam, Herd Whisper. A green, a white for a 3/2 human druid legendary creature. As long as it's your turn, mounts and vehicles you control have hexproof. Whenever a mount or vehicle you control attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Well, obviously, if you're playing a mount deck, you play this card, right? There's not really much to that. Mounts and vehicles, I should say. That does make a difference. Which Miriam is apparently a rider and a pilot. But yeah, cool card for sure. If you're playing that deck, you obviously want, probably at least 3 of these in your deck. So Toru the Infiltrator. Blue black 2/3 human ninja rogue legendary menace. When this and or one or more other non-token creatures enter the battlefield under your control, if none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them, draw a card. This is a weird card. So when this or one or more other non-token creatures enters the battlefield, but none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them, draw a card. So if you're ninjutsuing things, you get to draw a card. Or if you're doing some other thing to just trick them into play, you get to draw cards. Yeah, this is a weird card. I don't think it necessarily makes ninjas good, but it's a fun design for sure. Here's a vehicle instead of a mount. Mobile Homestead. 2 colorless, 3. It's a mobile home. They're having way too much fun with the set, and I'm here for it. 2 colorless for a 3/3 vehicle. Has haste as long as you control a mount, so it can be pulled by horses, obviously. Whenever Homestead attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you can put it on the battlefield tapped. It crews for 2. This is useful. I don't know if there's a deck it goes into. I don't even know if the mount deck wants it particularly, but it's kind of neat. I will try to play with this, but I don't think I would call it good. We have Outcaster Trailblazer, 2 colors and a green for a 4/2 human druid. When it enters the battlefield, add 1 mana of any color. That's interesting. So it technically costs 2. Whenever another creature of power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. And we already have some other things that care about drawing cards, so this could be fun. And then it has plot 3. Now the plot makes this card kind of interesting, right? Because if you have one of those weird things where you're trying to set up a 5 mana thing, well, this can come into play, and then you get to add the mana as a bonus, right? So you get it for free, technically, on the following turn. And then if you have a land, you'll have 5 mana, and you could do whatever it is you needed to do. This is kind of a weird card, but kind of interesting. It'd be cool to see where this card ends up getting used, because it's definitely one of those ones that can see some play. Shoot the Sheriff. I don't know, we don't even know who the Sheriff is here yet. But colorless and a black, instant, destroy target, non-outlaw creature. I mean, this card's alright. If you're playing limited, you'll play it because it's an removal, but there's so many creature types that count as an outlaw. And even in constructed, this could be a little quirky. You're better off still playing your cut downs, your go for the throats, whatever. We have a bunch of quality 1, 2, and 3 mana kill spells in black. But it's interesting that it exists. It'll be around post-rotation, but I don't know if it trumps the other cards you want to be playing with. Smuggler Surprise. This is a rare spree card, so it's a green plus. 2 lets you mill 4 cards. You may put up to 2 creature or land cards from among those into your hand. Or you can pay +5, so 4 and a green. You may put up to 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Or you can pay +1, creatures you control with power 4 or greater gain hexproof and indestructible to end your turn. There's a lot going on here. You could pay 2 just to give big creatures hexproof and indestructible, which is nice. You could pay 3 so you could mill stuff and then get some of those cards in your graveyard into your hand. Or you could pay 5 to just put monsters from your hand into play. Or you could pay 5 plus 2 plus 1 is 8, and then that would let you mill, put things from your yard into your hand, and then get to put those into play, which is also pretty good late game. And interestingly, this is an instant to do all that. So probably be a pretty playable card. Hellspur Brute, 4 colorless and a red, 5/4. Minotaur Mercenary, a couple of Minotaurs in the set, has affinity for Outlaws, which is kind of cool, so all the Outlaws make this cheaper, and it has Trample. If there is a good Outlaw aggro deck, this is going to be a piece for it, obviously. I mean, even if you can play this for 3 mana, right, that's still fine. A 3 mana 5/4 with Trample. Like, you play something else on 2, so this now only costs 4. I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a 1/1 you play. Actually, if you play something on 1, something on 2, you get to play this on 3, and you have a 5/4. Yeah, this card has potential. I will at least say that. Caught in the Crossfire. This is another uncommon spree. It is red, red plus 1. Caught in the Crossfire deals 2 damage to each outlaw creature. Oh, that's interesting. Or plus 1, Caught in the Crossfire deals 2 damage to each non-outlaw creature. So this is pretty cool because you can play it both for and against the outlaws. And it's basically 3 mana either way to deal 2 to everything. So not like a crazy card, but it is interesting that this most likely shows up in the outlaw deck as a thing against non-outlaws. I don't think you would take the chance to do it otherwise, but it is interesting. Hellspur Posse Boss. This is 2 colorless, red, red for a 2/4 lizard rogue. Other outlaws you control have haste. Okay, well now we're seeing a couple of different cards for the outlaw type deck. When this boss enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 red mercenary creature tokens with tap, add, +1, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, this is another decent... Like, the downside to this card is that it's a 2/4 for 4 mana. But you kind of have to look past that because it's making a 2/4 and 2 1/1s, right? So you're effectively getting a 7... Well, I guess you're getting a 4/6 for 4 mana, plus giving all your other things haste. And in this case, it also gives those mercenaries you just made haste. So you're getting a 2/4 and getting to give 2 other things potentially +1, +0. So yeah, a lot kind of going on with this card that's actually kind of neat. And yeah, I don't know. I think if this deck is a thing, you play a couple copies of this. But I don't know. We'll have to see if the Outlaws deck is actually a thing or not. Assimilation Aegis. Colorless blue-white equipment. When it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target creature until this card leaves the battlefield. Not a target creature you control or opponent controls, it's just a creature, period. And then when it becomes attached to a creature, for as long as this remains attached to it, that creature becomes a copy of a creature exiled with it. Oh, so that's interesting. So this can exile a thing, and then whatever you equip with it becomes a copy of the thing that's trapped in it, effectively. That's a cool design. I don't know if it's good, because you're really relying really on your opponent to have something good, because otherwise, like, I don't know. This is a quirky card. I'm sure there's something here I'm missing, but yeah, we'll see. All right, Nimble Brigand, 2 colorless and a blue for a 1/3. Can't be blocked if you committed a crime this turn. Whenever it deals combat damage, your player gets to draw a card. All right, this is a fun way to draw cards in a crime type deck, but otherwise probably not the most exciting thing. But it is a rogue, so it does fit the, criminal, outlaw, whatever deck. We just have a bag of gold, 3 colorless artifact. When you commit a crime, put a loot counter on burglar. Oh, so it's Burglars Bag is what it's called. Put a loot counter on Burglars Bag. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. You can pay 2 and tap it, remove 2 loot counters from it to draw a card. Probably a little slow for constructed play. I mean, it does tap for mana, which control decks do like. So maybe there's room there, and you get to draw a card late, because even countering stuff does count as a crime. So it could maybe find homes there. But I think if this does, it will probably only find a home once something like the Celestis is gone, and then this could fill that slot. But it's a neat card. This town ain't big enough. 4 colorless and a blue for an instant. This spell costs 3 less to cast. If it targets a permanent you control, return up to 2 target non-land permanents to their owner's hands. So for 2 mana, you can return 1 of your things and something the opponent controls, or 2 of your own things. Or you can just pay 5 and return 2 things. Probably doesn't get played and constructed, but it is a good limited card just to clear the way for you to Alpha Strike late in the game. Lila, Undefeated Slick Shot. I can't remember if we covered this or not, but anyway, Colorless and a blue-red 3/3 prowess. So again, this is more of the blue-red play more spells deck. Whenever you cast a multicolor instant or sorcery spell from your hand, exile that spell instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. If you do, it becomes plotted. Interesting. So if you are playing multicolor spells, you get credit for it as a prowess spell or counting as a spell, but then when it resolves, you just exile it, so you get it for free next turn. This is cool. This could be one of the cards that, if you can find, now granted, it has to be a multicolor spell, so that is a thing, and you have to find how many blue-red things are worth playing. But if you find the right ones, could be pretty cool. This looks like Combal Stern Mayor, colorless black-white for a legendary human advisor 2/4. When one or more tokens enter the battlefield under an opponent's control, create a tapped copy of each of them. This ability triggers only once each turn. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. My goodness. So whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under opponent's control, create a tapped copy of them until end of turn. So any token they make, you will make a copy at one time each turn. And that can be on your turn and their turn if that happens for some reason. And then whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield, you will gain a life and your opponent loses a life. This card is so wacky, but probably pretty damn good. Yeah, this one's an interesting one. We have Tai Wen Perfect Shot, red white 2/3, human mercenary, legendary. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to a creature equal to that creature's toughness, you draw a card. So if you deal exactly enough, you get to draw a card. And then you can pay X and tap it. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player this turn, it deals that much damage plus X instead. Oh, so that's interesting. So she helps you make it the right amount so you can deal exactly enough and end up drawing a card. It feels like a little bit too much work, honestly, but it is a 2/3 for 2, which is kind of nice. If you are playing some type of humans deck with a little bit of burn, maybe this works. Cool card. I don't know if it really fits a lot of different builds, but it's neat. Right, we have Requisition Raid. It's another spree card. So it's 1 mana plus, 1 white mana plus. Pay 1, destroy target artifact. Pay 1, destroy target enchantment. Pay 1, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls. So for 2 mana, you can put a +1 on everything. Or honestly, if I'm playing the Selesnya +1/+1 counters decks, this is a shoe-in, right? You get a card that can let you destroy artifacts or enchantments, or just pump your whole team, which triggers a bunch of stuff usually. And it's pretty versatile. It is a sorcery, so that's the downside, but cheap way to destroy artifact, cheap way to destroy enchantments, and you can do all of those for a total of just 4 mana. Karavek the Punisher, colorless black for a 3/3 human warlock. Whenever you commit a crime, exile up to 1 target black card from your graveyard and copy it. You may cast the copy. If you do, you lose 2. What? Like this? Hold up. So it doesn't care about the cost of the card. It can be any black card from your graveyard, including creatures, I guess. Yeah, this card's good. Like, this is wild. Yeah, this card's a little bit concerning. I'm not gonna lie. We'll see if it's as busted as we think, but it has a high upside. Outlaw Stitcher, 3 colorless and a blue for a 1/4. When it enters the battlefield, create a blue 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature token. Then put 2 +1/+1 counters on that token for each spell you cast this turn, other than the first one. This has plot of 5. Yeah, there's too much there. Like, you have to play an extra spell to be able to play this and then get 2 counters on your 2/2. Yeah, I mean, again, this is one of the ones that feels like if I'm playing limited, I'll take a shot at it because it makes sense, but I'm not trying to play this in constructed. All right, y'all, I think from here, I'm just going to do the rest of the rares and mythics unless the uncommons look particularly interesting because there's a lot of cards. So, Giraffe the Flesh Right. Wow, if you say this wrong, it sounds like something very dirty. If you know, you know. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But Giraffe the Flesh Right, and I'm making sure I say that correctly. 2 colors and a blue for a 2/3 human warlock legendary. Whenever you cast a spell during your turn other than your first spell, that turn, create a 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature token. Whenever a zombie enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 on it for each other zombie that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So this is cool because it doesn't have a restriction. It's not just the first time you do it on the turn. It's just other than the first spell you cast. This could be paired with some of the other is it things that care about you playing multiple spells, because then your spells are now also becoming creatures and possibly getting extra +1/+1 stuff. So that could be kind of fun. This card could find its way into a few different decks. Here's an important piece. Intrepid Stable Master. Colorless and a green for a 2/2 human scout. It does have reach, being a giant bird rider thing, I guess. Tap, add a green, or you can tap it and add 2 mana of any color. Spend it only to cast mounts and vehicles. So obviously, if you're playing the mount/vehicle deck, this is obviously a card you're going to want for fast mana. Hey, we actually have a sheriff. There's a sheriff of Safe Passage. 2 colorless and white for a human knight. Enters the battlefield with +1/+1 on it, plus an additional +1/+1 counter for each other creature you control. And it has plot of 2. This is not crazy for a sheriff card. I thought it would do more. I mean, you pay 3 and maybe get like a 3/3 out of it. Gets an additional +1/+1 for each other creature. Yeah, so, I mean, I guess this feels underwhelming. All right, Stingerback Terror. 2 colorless, red for a 7/7. Okay, there's got to be a downside. 4 mana for a 7/7 flying trampler. It gets -1/-1 for each card in your hand. Okay, that's fair, but it's probably still going to be like a 4/4 anyway by that time when you cast it. And it has plot of 3. So this is okay. So this has a plot cost that's less than the actual cost to play it. Do you get a bigger? You have a chance to play more cards out of your hand over a couple of turns. Yeah, this is an interesting damn card. Wow, a 7/7 potential flying trample dragon. Yeah, this is a cool card. And we saw, I think it was a Magda that gave Scorpion Dragons haste. So this could all be part of the same deck, which could be kind of cool. Railway Brawler, 3 colorless, green, 5/5. Reach, trample. There's a lot already going on here for 5 mana. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is its power. Wow, so all your other creatures just get extra big. And this has plot of 4. This card could be a menace. It has reach and trample. In duplicate, they're sick. The problem is, green has some other really good things at 5 mana, but this is really, really cool. Not gonna lie, this is an interesting and fun card. Pillage the Bog, a black and a green sorcery. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is twice the number of lands you control. Put one of the cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Adds plot of colorless, green, black. All right, this is good, right? Just later in the game, look at like 5 cards, 6 cards, put one of them in your hand. It's playable. I don't know how playable compared to other cards, but obviously useful. And then we have Garuda, Mirror of the Wilds, a red, a green, and a white for a 3/3 legendary human shaman. Has haste. Non-token creatures you control have tap, create a token that's a copy of target token you control that entered the battlefield this turn. That is a really interesting ability. So this does have some potential because there are cards like Adeline, like I mean, granted, you're all talking about copying 1/1s, but still, it's non-token creatures you control. If you're not attacking with them, you can just tap and copy another token that came in the battlefield that turn. So this is kind of cool. And it doesn't have to be a creature token. It's just target token. So even if this doesn't get played in standard, there are definitely some commander decks where this card could show up. And all right, y'all, that's a wrap on day 3. Let me know what you thought was cool, because today felt like so many absurd cards. There's so much to talk about. But if you need a wrap up from day 2, I'm going to link it here for you. Man, I will catch y'all in the next one.